Hi everyone, Dave DeSteno here, host of How God Works. We've had a lot of new listeners join us over the past year. And so while we're hard at work on our next season of the show coming this fall, we thought we'd dig into the archives and share a few of our favorite episodes. Ones that explore some of the biggest, most universal questions and challenges in life. And we'll do it, as always, through the combined lens of spirituality and the science behind it. So whether these episodes are new to you, or offer a chance for further reflection, we hope you'll enjoy them. And if you do, tell your friends. Our show has grown thanks to you spreading the word. So please share it with friends, family, or anyone else who you think might enjoy it. We'll be back in September with all new episodes for Season 7 of How God Works. See you then. The first time Liz Milner heard the voice of God, she was a school teacher in her early 20s, living near London with her husband. And they were going through a really tough time in their relationship.
I made a lot of mistakes. I was drifting away from my husband. I was unhappy. I would say our marriage was on the point of breaking apart and dissolving at that point.
Until she took a group of students on a camping trip in the north of England in the dead of winter. While there one night, she had to get up to go to the bathroom, which, when you're camping in the cold, can mean a long, unpleasant walk across a field.
It was raining, it was dark, it was windy. And I was walking through that field and I literally heard the voice of God say, "Liz, come back to me, come back to your husband, come back home." I hadn't particularly been thinking about that. I wasn't praying at the time, but I heard God speak. I stood in the middle of that field and I remember crying. I felt like God was connecting with me and giving me a way back to Him, but also to my relationship with my husband.
Have you ever felt the presence of God? I did once. Well, kind of. I was about 10 years old and had a dream, one that's remained vivid to me to this very day. I met God. Really. I was Catholic, so to me, God was in the form of Jesus. But I remember standing in front of Him outside my childhood church and feeling a mix of love and power emanating from Him. He didn't say anything. He just reached out His hand to touch me. It was one of the most powerful dreams I ever had, and for days afterward, it stuck with me. Of course, it happened while I was sleeping, so it was easy to write off as one of those crazy dreams we all have, where we can fly, where we're back in 6th grade and forgot all the answers to a math test. But it felt different. I still don't know exactly what to make of it, and I'm inclined to still write it off as an artifact of REM sleep. But experiences like Liz's aren't as easy to brush aside. She wasn't dreaming at the time. She wasn't even praying. She was trying to find the restroom. But in that most mundane of goals, she heard a voice that seemed divine, and it changed the course of her life.
It was the beginning of a decision really to reconcile and work to make the marriage succeed, which we did, and we're still married. But that was the turning point, that moment in the field. I'll never forget it. It's very vivid to me still.
Today, Liz is an Episcopalian priest who works with prison inmates in Northern California. And that experience she had in the field wasn't a one-off. She's kept the two-way conversation with God going over the years. And her experience isn't as rare as you might think. A surprising number of people report seeing or even just feeling something around them that they can't explain. If you don't have any kind of belief in the divine, these kind of experiences can be easy to dismiss. It's a trick of the mind, or, like in my case, maybe a dream that seemed a bit too real. But if you are religious, the interpretation can be different.
I think more often than not, it becomes intimate, personal evidence that spirit is real. And so it really matters. It's no longer something that you read in a book. It's no longer something that somebody else says. God has been in the park with you, and you know he's there.
That's Stanford University anthropologist Tanya Luhrmann. She wrote the book How God Becomes Real, and she spent most of her career studying how people live out their faith and connect with God. She says that asking why people of faith believe in the scientifically unprovable kind of misses the point.
You are immediately asking, what's gone wrong with these people who believe in God? I think that's not necessarily helpful. I also think that people of faith are perfectly aware that the belief is impossible or ridiculous, or that prayer often fails. A deeper way of trying to understand is to say, how does somebody come to have the visceral sense that a spirit is present to them, that spirit cares about them, that spirit is salient to the way that their lives unfold?
Since scientists can't know for sure whether a person is actually sensing the divine in any given situation, a better question is, how does it happen? And perhaps equally important, can people make it happen more often? Today we're going to talk to Tanya about exactly that.
You need to train yourself to be able to experience the invisible other as present and as responsive.
We'll also talk to Harvard neuroscientist Michael Ferguson, who studies what's going on in the brain when people feel a divine presence. Like when Mormons say they're feeling the Spirit.
So feeling the Spirit, just in terms of the qualitative experience, it is often described as this warm glow.
As someone who grew up in the Church of Latter-day Saints, Michael's actually had some of the experiences he now studies. And he doesn't think that exploring the science necessarily makes them any less significant.
If you have that type of a reductive approach to any dimension of human experience, it runs the risk of sapping the meaning or the mystery out of it. So I think that the challenge really for us as scientists who respect the human dimension is to hold these things simultaneously and not see them as intrinsically in competition with one another. That we can still have a material understanding that includes mechanisms for processes and recognize that there is something that is inherently meaningful about being human.
I'm Dave DeSteno, and this is How God Works. So, a lot of people, both secular and religious, think of faith as something you either have or you don't. You either believe in God or you don't. But I'm wondering if that's painting it with a little bit too broad a brush, assuming everybody who has some faith has a similar experience. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a really good point.
Here's Stanford anthropologist Tanya Luhrmann again.
I am really struck by, first of all, the range of people's experiences and commitments when I'm in a group of people of faith. And also the sort of the gap between the feeling of involvement with God and the belief. So people have this like little belief tag where they say, I believe in God. But their sense of what that means to them is enormously varied. I think that part of what may play a role is the person's ability to experience God as a social relationship.
While religion can improve people's lives in many ways, one of the most basic comes through community. People feel less lonely as they meet others who share their faith. But in some cases, one of those others can be God itself.
I think one of the most striking things in my own work is that when people enter a faith community, over time they come to experience the God as, to some extent, a person among people. They come to feel as if they are genuinely having a back and forth interaction with God. And I think that matters to people.
It certainly did to Liz.
It gave me a sense of connection to God that I think I hadn't had before. That felt like a moment where God was intervening in my life to restore and heal myself, but also my relationship. And so I felt very personally connected to God in a new way. And I felt a renewed sense of, I'm not doing this on my own. God is with me in this.
And when God is with you, Tanya says it can feel empowering.
Often, unusual experiences in a spiritual context are supremely satisfying. The most famous of these unusual experiences is the mystical experience, where somebody feels caught up in some moment. They feel more themselves than ever before, and yet they're not themselves at all. They're one with the universe. They feel an overwhelming awareness, usually a fundamental knowledge that they are immortal. They feel flooded with goodness. And for many people who have that experience, it is a kind of bedrock confidence that the world is good, that they are going to be successful in the world, that they are loved.
That confidence, that feeling of supportive connection, can come in handy when times get tough.
My life is not one big ecstatic encounter with God. I clean the toilet, I make dinner, I go to work, I look after the kids, and life goes up and down. Life has gone up and down since that point. But I look back on that moment when I'm doubting God's presence, or when I'm going through a hard time, or I'm stressed with my children. And I remember that sense of being so close and so loved by God, having my eyes opened to the beauty of the world and the people around me. And it brings comfort.
People don't always report sensing God in the same way, though. Back in 2011, Tanya conducted a study comparing evangelical Christians and Thai Buddhists, and found that while both groups reported hearing divine voices at similar rates, evangelicals were more likely to interpret an adrenaline rush or intense emotion as sensing God. Buddhists, on the other hand, were likelier to point to an experience of sleep paralysis or feelings of calm detachment as part of sensing the divine.
The way people experience God has something to do with what it is to be human, and it has something to do with what the faith invites you to experience.
Put another way, people's faith, what they understand God to be, affects how they experience it.
So Christians, particularly contemporary charismatic Christians, learn to experience God as talking inside their mind. They will be going through their day, and they will have a sense that God has answered them. Maybe because they have a thought and they feel differently in their body. People have an array of interior experiences, what you might call inner voices, mental images, things that seem to pop into their mind. So people are always making these judgments. I know that spirit is out there. I believe that spirit will connect to me. Is this an experience of spirit? There's on the body stuff. People talk about goosebumps. They talk about feeling a sense of warmth. People have what a psychologist might call hallucinations or quasi-hallucinations. They see, they hear, they feel touched. Sometimes they smell, sometimes they taste. We know that these sensory or quasi-sensory experiences are pretty common in the world in general. Some sense that you have been called by somebody not yourself, pretty common on the edge of sleep. That's a human experience, and it might be a theological expectation. Experiences of presence. Presence is really important to ask about, and it's really difficult to know what somebody's answering. So there is a kind of human experience in which somebody says, God is sitting on that park bench. I can't see him. I can't smell him. I can't hear him. I know exactly where he's located. So that's a real event in the body. And there's a generic sense that God is present, that Spirit is present. That's really common.
Feeling God's presence is something Michael Ferguson is familiar with, both as someone who grew up as a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints and as a neuroscientist who studies how people experience what they see as sacred. For Mormons, that specific experience is called feeling the Spirit.
So feeling the Spirit, just in terms of the qualitative experience, it is often described as this warm glow, this feeling of calm and of really profound peace. And the way that functions, again, at the level of truth claims, is a point of evidence that what you're hearing or what you're pondering or what you're contemplating is connected in some way to a transcendent truth about God or about the will of God. So this phenomenon of feeling the Spirit, this profound peace, this warm glow that really has a somatic, or that really has a bodily dimension to it, is used as a point of evidence for how, again, Mormons report confidence in their faith propositions.
I guess the question then is, how does it change people? Or is it fair to say that it changes people either in the close time after when it happens or even their long-term view?
Sure. So I also, as part of my life within the LDS faith, served as a missionary for 2 years. So was, one of those people in the white shirts and the tie, going and knocking on doors and sharing the Book of Mormon with people. And certainly this experience of feeling the Spirit was routinely central in people's conversion and really made the difference as to whether or not someone would decide to join the faith.
So you mean someone to whom you were speaking with about joining the faith, they could have it
that's right.
that rapidly?
That's right.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And again, this is an open question. Why is it that some people tend to have these types of phenomenal experiences pretty quickly after coming into contact with missionaries or religious ministries or with a set of scriptures?
When you experience it, I understand the sense of feeling this kind of warm glow, and I think most of us can imagine that. Does it have a touch of transcendence to it? Are you feeling that you are actually touching or in the presence of or somehow contacting the divine? Or is it more a sense of kind of that warm glow when someone loves and cares about you?
There's definitely varying degrees of this phenomenon of feeling the Spirit. And certainly both in the individuals that I've worked with in various studies, as well as from my own personal experience, there definitely can be these peak moments where it is as if some dimension of reality is like opening up into your awareness.
Does it happen spontaneously when you're just kind of walking around and you're like, oh, there's God. God loves me. Or is it in response to asking about something, seeking something? What tends to bring it on?
There are things that can put an individual in a situation where they're more likely to have the experience of feeling the Spirit. So, for example, going to the temple for religious practicing Latter-day Saints. The temple, which is distinct from the chapel where they go every Sunday for Sunday church meetings, the temple is designated as like the holiest location on earth. So certainly there are place conditions going to the temple, going to a sacred place. But in addition to external place conditions, a lot of it as well is an internal preparation of getting to a place where you feel at peace in your relationships with the people around you, that you feel a clarity, a purity of conscience. In addition to those things, there certainly can be those spontaneous moments where it's like, boom, almost inexplicably, it's like you're clocked by the transcendent.
I was stopped at a stoplight, and all of a sudden I felt an intense sense of the presence of God with me.
That's Liz Milner again, talking about one of those out-of-the-blue experiences. It hit at an unexpected, even mundane time. Driving home from the grocery store.
I hadn't been thinking about God. I hadn't been listening to religious music. There was nothing in my immediate vicinity that was prompting this. It was almost like God just broke into my world. I felt an intense sense of love from God. I looked around me. The world looked bright. The people looked beautiful. It lasted maybe 10, 15 minutes. I wasn't high. I wasn't drinking. I don't remember smelling or hearing anything, but I did feel warm. I felt relaxed. That sense of warmth was a bodily sensation. It was a sense of peaceful, warm, comfortable connection with what I was interpreting to be God.
While feeling the divine can come out of nowhere, it can also be a skill, something that people can cultivate.
In order to feel that Spirit, God, is alive and active in your world, the first thing you need is a good narrative. I actually think of it as a paracosm, a shared imaginative world. Harry Potter's a paracosm. Many people know, and they know it so well. The more details J.K. Rowling provides, the more you can develop your own version of the story. It helps you to feel connected. It helps you to feel that the characters are present for you.
In other words, a good story with plenty of details not only makes it easier for you to remember, it also helps you make the story your own and imagine yourself as a part of it. Just think of all the cosplaying fantasy fans learning Elvish or Klingon and debating the finer points of dragon lore.
Biblical or other religious paracosms don't carry the tag of fiction, but they work in some of the same ways. They enable you to feel like you know who you are in this religious world. You know who you're interacting with. You know things about the Spirit that's speaking back. Second thing you need to do is you need to train yourself to be able to experience the invisible other as present and as responsive. So I think there are really two pieces of that training. The first is to practice the presence, to imagine that the Spirit is present, and to use all of your inner senses.
For Catholics, St. Ignatius of Loyola created a set of spiritual exercises to do just that, to imaginatively go into Scripture to make it more alive.
The flight out of Egypt. So Ignatius wants you to stand by the side of that donkey, look at its whiskers. What is Mary wearing? What's the expression on her face? Are you standing on the side of the donkey or in front of the donkey? What's Joseph looking like? Is the road they're walking out of, is that a wide road or is that a narrow road? Ignatius didn't care how you imagined it. He just wanted you to imagine it. And if you do the Ignatian exercises now, the leader of the group will invite you to stand by the side of the donkey, and then to be Joseph, and then to be Mary, and maybe to be the donkey, and maybe to be the baby, and to take all of those positions in turn so you come to inhabit them. Part of prayer is representing and understanding yourself to be interacting with the person to whom you're praying. The other piece of it is just not troubling about the imagination, but just talking to the invisible being as if he is there or she is there. So you just kind of chatter away. So evangelical churches, for example, tell people that God wants to hear what they had for dinner, what kind of coffee they're going to buy, where they want to go on vacation, like anything to get the person talking to God as if God were present.
Okay, but does it actually work? Tanya's not religious, but she had the opportunity to try this out for herself early on in her career when she was researching magic practitioners for her PhD. We're not talking about stage magicians here. Tanya was in London studying modern-day pagans.
So I actually started with the idea of asking how apparently reasonable people could believe in apparently unreasonable beliefs. What I really found out was that these people were doing deliberate practices. They told me, if you want to understand magic, you've got to practice magic. So I was writing rituals, I was using tarot cards, I was buying crystals, I was doing, whatever. And I got myself initiated into this group, into that group, and I practiced. They gave me deliberate practices. So for 15 minutes a day for a year, I sat in my room, shut my eyes, went up to a garden in the sky. I began to plant things. I had an altar. I had a chalice on the altar. I did rituals on the altar. So I was doing, and we did all sorts of versions of these things. And what really struck me was that as I did this, it felt that my senses became more alive, that the world became more sensorially rich. It seemed more meaningful, more interconnected. And I started to have what I sometimes gloss as cool, weird experiences. I was really being invited to read novels as if they were unfolding before me, as if I wasn't kind of trying to, analyze what how the author was presenting the protagonist. I was just trying to be there in the story. And I was reading this novel about the Arthurian legend called The Mists of Avalon. And there are a lot of druids in this story. I woke up one morning and I swear I saw 6 druids standing at the window. My experience was that they were perceptually present. They were really there. And so I shot out of bed and they disappeared. But I was so struck by that. And the thing is that it wasn't just me. And it wasn't my only experience. It was my only experience like that. But I would go to rituals and I would feel the power. What does that mean? I don't know what was going on in my body, but I would feel an electrical current move through me. I would see the horned god in my mind's eye, but he was so strong in my mind's eye. And that's what other people were describing. And so it dawned on me that if I wanted to understand how spirits became real to people, I really had to understand what these practices were changing in people's experiences and how they made sense of that.
Over the years, Tanya started noticing a common trait across all these experiences: absorption. For some people, it's easier than it is for others to fall into a trance while listening to music, or to imagine the look and feel and smell of a memory so vividly that it feels real. These are the kinds of people who get so focused on a thought that they don't notice they finished washing the dishes. And according to Tanya's research, they're also the kinds of people who are likelier to have images and sensations come to them while they're praying, to feel like they're really connecting with God as a person. But what if this kind of thing doesn't come easy to you? Tanya wanted to see if certain types of practices really could help people learn how to become more absorbed, the way she had. So she invited over 100 Christians to her lab to complete a series of questionnaires and computer tasks to help her understand how they used mental imagery. She also asked them about how they pray and what types of spiritual experiences they've had. Everyone left the lab with a randomly chosen iPod. This was 2007. Some of the iPods were loaded with exercises to cultivate an inner sense through prayer, like vividly imagining yourself in a biblical scene, while some others just had lectures on the Gospels. The participants listened to whatever was on their iPod for half an hour a day, 6 days a week, for a month. Then, Tanya brought them back to the lab.
We found that people in the prayer condition were more likely to report that God was present to them, that God was more like a person. Those people reported more spiritual experiences. They reported more sense that God had spoken. And so I was struck that even with this little tiny training practice, that people who were invited to use their imagination to experience God more vividly really did behave as if they experienced God more vividly, or really did speak as if they had experienced God more vividly at the end of that month.
Everything that we see, hear, or feel is, in one way or another, represented in our brains. While we don't actually know what consciousness is, we know it resides there. We're still in the early days of trying to understand the neuroscience of experiencing the sacred, but Michael Ferguson is on the cutting edge. He's actually studied Mormons feeling the spirit while having their brains scanned.
Yes, so in the brain, we were able to see that reliably when Latter-day Saints who practice their faith were in an fMRI machine, that if they reported to be feeling the spirit, there was a set of neural regions that showed elevated activity patterns. And that set of regions included salience detection regions, frontal attention regions, but very provocatively, the nucleus accumbens, which is part of the reward system. And so just the fact that we could see any reliable associations in the brain was stunning to me. Furthermore, the fact that it was incorporating such provocative areas like the nucleus accumbens, like the reward system in the brain, opened up all kinds of implications for what this might mean on its face.
The nucleus accumbens is a part of the brain intimately linked with motivation and satisfaction. And as you might guess, it's linked to the rest of the reward system too. What Michael's data show is that feeling the spirit is rewarding, even at the level of the brain. But does that mean that people are going to want to keep trying to experience God? Kind of like chasing a positive high?
When people then have this type of experience, it feels so good. It feels so rewarding. It feels like it bursts the shackles of their mundane life in some way. And they want that more frequently. That's a good question about whether or not it can be pursued, something like pursuing a high. The funny thing about it is that the means for having those types of experiences tend to be very adaptive in nature, where it's like, I'm now going to do more service for the community.
Well, that's, on this show, we talk a lot about religious practices as tools that help people flourish in life. And so that does not surprise me at all. Where do you think belief comes in? That is it necessary to believe in a divine power in order to have a profound mystical experience?
Oh, definitely not.
Okay.
Definitely not. No, and this is just apparent throughout the data, that you can dissociate belief and faith from mystical experiences, even from experiences that people identify as sacred in nature. And this is coming into even greater focus in the current brain mapping work that I'm doing to differentiate brain circuits that support dogmatic beliefs from the brain circuits that support mystical experiences.
So there is definitely a difference between kind of being creed-oriented and thinking about what the tenets of your faith are and what your beliefs are versus that kind of profound experiential experience that sometimes we can't put into words.
Yeah. No, again, with the data that I'm looking at, with multiple data sets, with large sample sizes in these independent data sets, it's very apparent to me that we're localizing these sets of beliefs and these sets of experiences to different circuits in the brain.
You talk about something called existential mysticism as being essential for humans to help them meet a lot of the challenges that we face historically, but even more so now urgently as a society with global reach. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, when I look at a lot of what I think are existential crises, meaning like threats to our existence as a species. So, for example, just culture conflict, environmental catastrophe. I see a lot of these types of existential threats having the potential to be resolved or at least be mediated by a more widespread appreciation for mystical and transcendent experience. Part of that is a place that I'm coming to from personal reflection and personal observation on how, as I am more connected to my own spiritual life, I do tend to have a deeper appreciation for nature. I tend to have a deeper sense of intimacy and respect for the value of all human life. And also, as I'm looking at the brain circuits that are associated with some of these experiences, it's pretty startling to me in a positive way of being like kind of astonished and taken in awe that it does seem as if the stimulation of these brain circuits that are associated with mystical experiences orient individuals in more pro-social ways. That's just a natural outcome of greater levels of cooperativeness, of greater levels of compassionate regard, of reduced inclinations toward violent behavior. And so when I talk about, this phrase like existential mysticism, it's the notion that ability to experience life and being as something that has a very transcendent quality to it that we can all be intimately connected to is something that I see as helping to mediate so many of the things that really are urgent crises in our contemporary society.
Hearing an invisible entity's voice, feeling a divine presence. If you haven't experienced it, it can be tempting to write it off as a glitch of the mind. And for people with a serious mental illness, it can be. But for most who have experienced it, it can be powerful, transformative, real. And while I can't say whether God is speaking to people or not, I can say that we're built, that we've evolved to be open to these types of experiences, even cultivate them if we want. And for most of those who do, it changes them for the better.
As I live my days talking to God and listening to God, that sense of how can I be a loving presence in this world? How can I make tangible and real the love of God to the people around me is something that I'm constantly connected to.
How God Works is hosted and written by me, Dave DeSteno. Our senior producer is Josie Holtzman. Our producer is Sophie Eisenberg. Our intern is Annika DeVries. Executive producer is Genevieve Sponsler. Merritt Jacob is our mix engineer and composed our theme, which was arranged by Chloe DeSteno. The executive producer of PRX Productions is Jocelyn Gonzalez. This podcast was also made possible with support from the John Templeton Foundation. If you want to learn more, you can find our website at howgodworks, all one word, .org, or follow me on X or Blue Sky @David DeSteno.